Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. And each week, we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry, and today we are lucky enough to have a remarkable guest joining us, Brendan Collins, Senior Director of Solutions Engineering at Rohirrim. Hello, Brendan. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Brendan, just tell us a little bit about yourself and the company that you work at.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm our senior director of solutions engineering here, like you mentioned. I generally am working with customers kind of in the pre-sales cycle. And what Rohirrim is a organization-specific generative AI platform that works with a lot of large organizations. We are generally delivering very private installations of generative AI, and we are primarily working with customers to help them respond to things that in the UK you all might call them bids and tenders, but kind of more broadly we call them solicitation response generally. And then we also have some we have kind of a sister platform of that works with agencies to create solicitation documents as well. So it tends to be a lot of highly secure environments, and it also tends to be just very large organizations that are doing that type of work, and it tends to be working with a lot of unstructured data.
So we were talking a little bit earlier about the name. So I think this is probably a great opportunity to jump in with that. So tell us a bit about the name.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are Rohirrim. The platform is called Rohan. Our founder, and I'll speak about him quite a bit today, probably as we talk a little bit about our technology throughout the day. But he's a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Was a big. I think The Hobbit was the first book he had ever really gotten a chance to read, sort of cover to cover with no parental help. And he is a huge Lord of the Rings fan. He can tell you just about any character and go into all that depth. And so here at Rohirrim, we've kind of taken on that, and we do have some great culture around that. For anybody that's ever curious, for anybody that reaches their 1 year here at Rohirrim, they get put into like an AI picture where they look like a character from the story. So I've been here for almost 2 years, so I do have a picture up on the wall at our office, and so that's kind of a fun thing that we do here that does kind of match the Lord of the Rings
It sounds nice.
vibe.
Sounds like a great working culture, doesn't it? Sounds like something really interesting and kind of geeky and kind of niche, but I love it. So can you tell a little bit about why you joined the company? Like what brought you to this point?
So I've done about 5 startups at this point. I've mostly joined like Series A level companies. I've with a couple of those, we've gone up to Series B, where there's one that went all the way to a Series D. So I've kind of, I've generally been somebody who's gone to startups. Whether that means I'm a glutton for punishment or what, I couldn't exactly tell you. But I think what it does generally say about me is I'm somebody that's worked a lot in emerging technologies, because usually that's sort of what startups are doing. They're either trying to disrupt established players, or they have emerging technology that's new and different. And it's kind of no different from me. Starting back in like 2017, I was doing machine learning types of platforms. People were calling things AI at that point in time, but in reality, what they were doing was, building and deploying algorithms to run on data. I went from there to kind of a more structured data environment. And, I saw as these large language models, everybody probably kind of remembers the, fall of 2022 when OpenAI kind of hit the market. People just started to see some of the power of that. And so I knew very quickly with the platform I was working with at the time that this was going to be a pretty big change. And ever since I started working in machine learning, I had felt that algorithms, we are a group of people, our generations were not blessed with working with the steam engine or with the Wright brothers flying for the first time. But in our lives, the creation of these algorithms and these larger scale now large language models, and even what we'll see beyond, is probably really the biggest technological shift of our time, and will probably have as big of an impact as the steam engine and the airplane did on humanity. And so I've always really wanted to stay around that technology and be a part of it, because it's something that's interesting to me. And so at Rohirrim, I saw kind of what we were doing from a technology and security perspective, and I knew that it was going to need to be a platform like this that really takes hold in this industry. And that's what really got me into starting here.
Were you always interested in machine learning and AI, or was it something that you kind of just happened across?
I think so. Initially, I had come from an organization where we were doing a lot of infrastructure support for organizations. And I started to see that, there were some real changes in the way that infrastructure was coming across. And people will remember the, changes to things like virtualization and containerization and things like that, which was sort of what initially kind of got me interested. And then I started to realize from there that the real challenges are going to be how we deploy some of these algorithms at real infrastructure scale. And so that's kind of where the shift happened for me. That was probably around 2015, 2016. I was lucky to have some good mentors in my life that kind of helped me with that. But that shift, I think, has been a real important thing for me. And, that's kind of where my career has taken off from then over the last, call it 10 years or so.
How important has mentoring and networking been for you? Because some people tend to be really, really lucky and just have the right person at the right time, and others just kind of like solo wing it and just happen to get the right people that they need.
I mean, I think it's a mix of both. I mean, I think I was fortunate that I had a mentor early on at an organization that I was working with who was, I would sort of describe, right place, right time. He was somebody that we were actually alumni of the same university. We were, multiple decades apart. So it's not like we had run into each other before, but, it was like we sort of bonded with that. And then as we kind of expanded, he'd had experience actually working at Microsoft at one point in his career. And that was very early on. So he kind of saw them grow. And that sort of helped me understand really how interesting and exciting doing the real startup thing, could really be. And then from there, I would say, like, I have tried as best I can to really seek out mentors in my career because I saw how valuable he kind of was at right place, right time. I think it's been kind of a mix of both. I would definitely say for a lot of the people who probably listen to this Bright Founders podcast, having mentors and having networking connections is really, really valuable when building some of these organizations. I really can't say enough how powerful a warm intro can be, whether it's needing a partner, whether it's trying to make a hire, whether it's an investor, or whether it's trying to, to get a customer. Warm intros are probably take you 70% further than a true cold reach out.
Are you an introvert, an extrovert, and does that affect how you go about networking? Because some people don't really like it that much.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I am actually more of an introvert. So it is a challenge for me sometimes where I have to sort of, work myself up into introducing myself to somebody. Again, that's like I say, that's where a warm intro can be awesome is it's really just, hey, Barry, I know you know this guy. It would be great if, he could, and then you can sort of jump off from there. And, we both know Barry and he's a great guy. And, so that can help a lot. But yeah, I mean, even at networking events and stuff, sometimes you just got to kind of psych yourself into it and go up and talk to people.
So let's do a little bit of self-selling. So what skills have you taken from your previous roles that have been most valuable, like working for Rohirrim?
Yeah, great question. So I mean, I would say a big one is really working with large enterprises. I've been really fortunate that in working with small organizations and startups, a lot of times the meetings and customer cycles that you end up having at startups are often usually with really large organizations, which sometimes surprises people that, you're this 20, 30, 40 person organization, and yet you're selling to a 100,000 plus employee company. And I would say what I think is invaluable experience there is you start to just get very ingrained in those meetings are just meetings to you. Whereas I think when you're at a larger organization, sometimes people have to get, they kind of have to get psyched up, or they feel like they have to prepare a whole bunch for some of these really big customer meetings. And I think that that's super important. But I think what happens when you're in early stage startups is like, you're just kind of doing that so frequently that they just become sort of a part of your, what you're doing. And so you don't feel like you have to, prep or you don't feel like you have to get as psyched up, psychologically for those. You can be a little bit more relaxed in the meetings. And so I would say that from my early, startups that I did all the way through to Rohirrim, I think that's been something that helps a lot because it does really change your presence on some of these calls with large organizations, and it certainly makes them feel comfortable.
Amazing. And how do you approach translating complex like AI or language learning model capabilities into solutions that actually meet real business needs?
Yeah, it's and that's something that I think comes from I think people that are very, do a lot of reading, read a lot of articles, try to understand how, what I mean, what I try to do usually most mornings, and it can be while I'm still laying in bed, even, before I've summoned the energy to actually get up and start the day. But a lot of times, like, I'll read a Medium article or read a couple of Medium articles, or, let the algorithms on your phone kind of work for you. But if there's things that are interesting to you that they're feeding you, read one or two of them before you start your day. And why I do that, I think, is because I like to see how other people are trying to explain certain types of things to a reader, or potentially even a non-technical reader. I mean, some articles are definitely going to be very technical,
Mm.
and some are not. So I think analogies are super critical when you start talking with business users, helping them understand, kind of meeting them where they are with analogies that are things that they understand, and really just trying to remember that, as powerful as the technology is, what your real focus is to help them understand how it solves their problems. So it really starts with listening a lot to what their problems are, and then kind of showing that you can marry that technology to it. And so, like I said, sometimes it involves kind of analogies and things like that, as opposed to really directly talking about the nuts and bolts
Uh,
of the models.
when you're having those conversations with stakeholders, like especially maybe at the early stages, like what would you say is the most important question that you have to ask them?
I think right now with AI, it's usually security focused questions. I think there's a lot of, and I say this is a little hyperbolic, but I think the root of it is true. Nobody wants their business to be on, the MSNBC front page that they had a leak and all their documents are now available on, Gemini or Chat GPT or Claude or something like that, right? And again, like I said, that's a little hyperbolic because, obviously we haven't seen anything of that kind of magnitude or scale yet. But I think no stakeholder wants to be the person that brought that type of thing into the organization. I mean, not only will, that obviously affect their career, but also just there's a community element there that you don't want to be the person that's bringing in that type of thing. So I think security is what's really important to a lot of people. And going back to the question that you were initially asked me, one of the things I vetted very hard before I came over here with our founder and the team that he has here as an engineering team was really, what are we doing from the security side? And that, to me, I think was what really gave me the green check to come over here, because I knew that was going to consistently be a thing. As somebody who'd done enterprise selling, I knew that was going to be a big issue. And so really making sure that we were kind of vetted, that we had vetted that really, really well is part of what gave me the confidence to come over here.
And do companies, when they're having these conversations with you, do they kind of are they a bit unrealistic? Do they have some unrealistic expectations, or maybe they like come across as more of like a wish list than an actual requirements?
Yeah, it's a good, yeah. And I would say that's true. I would say, though, Barry, one thing that I think is a little different than, or sorry, one thing that I think is not super different from Rohirrim to other tools is I think that a lot of the other tools I've sold, be it a big data platform, be it machine learning deployment tool, something like that, I think a lot of customers tend to have sometimes wish lists and unrealistic expectations of what they think, a tool can do. And so I don't think that's unique to AI. I do think that maybe there has been a little bit more media hype around, AI is doing all of these things for people, maybe. And so there's people that maybe have unrealistic expectations there. But I would say, as somebody who's worked with buyers that are in, machine learning, DevOps tools, ML ops types of tools, big data platforms, ETL types of tools, I would say it's not uncommon for most kind of buyers and enterprise teams to oftentimes have a little bit unrealistic expectations, or have more of a wish list of what they think the technology is going to do. And so, in that sense, I would say AI is actually probably the same as many other technologies I've sold.
Do you think AI is actually a misnomer, or do you think we are actually approaching AI being actually artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I guess a definition to me of what artificial intelligence would be, and as you said in the beginning, we do have a little bit of a geeky culture here at Rohirrim. So I would say, kind of the like the Jarvis from Iron Man, or like the Cortana from the Halo series, or some of the thinking machines from the Dune series or whatever, where you had truly autonomous platforms that could do their own thinking, had developed their own personalities and ideas, and, were maybe even more or less like scanned from real human brains and were, kind of operating the same way those were. I feel like we're actually still pretty far away from that. I don't think that that's something that I'm super concerned about that coming in the next couple years. Now, happy to be, or maybe unhappily, will be proven wrong. But I think we're still a little bit far away from that. That said, I think what I would love to see, which I think would be a really powerful kind of like next step, would be a platform that is essentially taking questions and understanding, not just to feed everything to an LLM and expect that the LLM is going to answer a bunch of questions, but also to be doing things like, well, his question not only requires me to process natural language, but it requires me to run multiple, k-means models, a predictive analysis model. It requires me to go and access a data set that, he has privately within his cloud. And then also am going to run these models on top of that. I think that is something that people would look and feel like is even closer to, advanced general intelligence or true like AI, the way that we might believe it. But I think that platform is probably much more closer on the horizon. And I wouldn't be shocked to see something like that hit the general, sphere in, call it the next 2 to 3 years, than I would be to actually see like us all getting to walk around with like a Jarvis to, help us with our day-to-day lives.
Since we're talking about AI specifically, like what kind of, or are there, I suppose I can't say what, like are there any AI trends or advancements that you're kind of like really excited about at the moment in terms of like enterprise applications?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'm going to say one here, and I know there's going to be some people out there that are like, oh, this again. But AI agents, I think, are really, really interesting. And I know that there's a lot of buzz and kind of hype around AI agents, and people, and people sort of get conflated around what that means and what it is. But I think it's really interesting to think about that you can have essentially completely independent pieces of software that are more or less conversing with each other using natural language processing. And so it's something that a human can, a normal human, somebody who's not technical, hasn't studied Python or Node or Java or C++ for years, can follow the way that these agents are interacting with each other, in a plain English way, and even jump in and provide their own instruction and say, no, like stop what you guys, stop what you're doing, change this, change that, and now go back to, the way that you were operating previously. I think that's super powerful. And I do think that that's a little bit underrated at the moment in terms of, do I think that you're going to necessarily have, a bunch of AI agent bank tellers that have taken everybody's job? No. And I think that that's some of what like the hype that comes around the AI agent stuff, and it makes people roll their eyes a little bit. What I think is super powerful is that your bank teller could now be basically speaking directly to their software just via natural language processing, and it can do some work for them to help them solve problems. And that I think is incredibly powerful, that I'm not sure that people have fully kind of grasped around what that looks like.
I agree. It's really interesting. Like I've used one of the Amazon AI chatbots and incredible, like really impressed. I've also used another one, and I won't say the company, just because, I'd rather not. But theirs was terrible, and it makes a massive difference. It really does make the world of difference. So I totally agree with you on that. Are there any like common like pitfalls that you run into, or companies can run into, when trying to integrate AI into existing workflows?
So one thing that the customer success team here at Rohirrim has done an incredible job of, and I give them a shout out here. Like I've been they're a world-class team. And it's one of the things that actually I watched them get built out when I came here. There was basically none of them when I arrived, and I've watched that team get built out and learn. And they're incredibly impressive. But what we've really found out is that, it's not so much the training of people on prompting. There is a piece of that. There is an art to prompting, but it's not so much that. Most people, most of us have, unfortunately, whether we want to or not, have had to grow up in the Teams, Slack, texting world, where most of us have figured out how to craft a, communication over words to something. And that's thankfully what these these large language models do very well, is understanding kind of the context and the communication that you're providing there. But I think the big hook that I've seen a little differently is truly the change management in organizations of how you take an existing process where you're telling people to now take, what you were doing here, this now should be done in this tool. The output then may go back into a manual process. That's going to be completely normal. You're not going to suddenly take step 2 of the process, move that into an AI tool, and then do 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 all in that AI tool. You might do step 2 and step 3 in that AI tool and then pull it out, and it's going to have to go back to a human for step 4, 5, and 6. But that, I think, has been a really interesting thing to watch, that really the bigger challenge with organizations is kind of helping them see which pieces of the puzzle should come into AI and which ones shouldn't. And I was just giving you the example of that, say a 7-step process. Maybe steps 2 and 3 are very AI heavy. And then maybe step 6 is somewhat AI heavy. Maybe you use it sometimes, maybe you don't. And then again, step 7 is it goes off to a real graphic designer who's going to polish something up and get it out the door, right? So like that, I think, has been a really interesting thing that we've had to train and enable our customers on, is understanding that there's change management in the process now with AI. But it's not that much different than other, traditional technologies that they're using.
And Brendan, like, how do you push for like innovation while still maintaining like or ensuring technical feasibility? I imagine there's lots of things that you would love to do and you would really like to push, but actually we're just not there yet.
Yeah, that's that's a pretty common, and I give our founder, his name is Steve Aberly, a ton of credit in kind of marrying this together. He's, we've been very visionary at the way that we've built our platform, but being very visionary, there's a certain amount of, you have to meet there's a certain amount of, that's the horizon, and you have to walk on the road that's in front of you. And so there has been things around, man, you could build a workflow that will do X, Y, and Z. But unfortunately, like, the token cost of doing that today is so astronomical that it's not really something you could put in front of an enterprise customer and make it work. So there's portions of that use some traditional software engineering to try to lower that. There's some of it you just have to say, unfortunately, today, we can't do that. So there's kind of a mix of that. But I would say in general, it's a good kind of mix of people inside an organization's experiences and skill sets and visions to kind of make that come to life, is that you have your people who are quite visionary around what they want the platform to do. And then you have people who understand what an enterprise sale is going to look like and know that, we couldn't walk in the door and say, oh yeah, you all can do this for 10 million bucks. They're going to say, no, that's not, not even within the realm of what we would look at spending. So, trying to then kind of marry those two things together, I think, is a mix of like people's experiences at this type of thing. But also, I mean, to what you originally asked, like, it's really important to have that long-term vision and try to be continuing to push the boundaries, because you do find out really interesting things about how you can do things. And humans, even more so than AI, are very innovative at how to like build things either on a shoestring budget or make things fit into a box that needs to be fit in, like a budgetary box or things like that. And so that's really fun, I think, just with startups in general.
Yeah, so I'm very much a daydreamer. I'm aim for the sky. I'm not the kind of person who likes to keep my feet on the ground, so I need someone there to plonk my feet on the ground. I'm not sure if are you that kind of person as well?
I am, at a lot of enterprise organizations, or a lot of the startups I've been at, I think I have often had been pulling our founders' feet back to the ground sometimes to say, like, I don't, like, I would love to sell that, but I don't think, like, it's ready for the enterprises. But I 1,000% appreciate those founders for pushing me to think more and more outside the box. And, and I think like that's something that truly is always going to keep me coming back to startups in some capacity. I'd love to be advising startups at some point in the future if I'm, fortunate enough to do that. And, obviously would like to continue to work with startups in some capacity in the future. I think it's those founders' vision that consistently, that I enjoy being around those types of people, because I think it does move me from kind of my personality, which, like I said, maybe is a little bit more restrained, and you can't do that type of thing, to where it's like, well, maybe we can do that type of thing. Maybe I should change my thinking a little bit. So, yeah.
Brendan, time is flying. I didn't realize I've got loads
Another
of questions more to ask you, but unfortunately, time is tight. So I'll just go for one more, if you don't mind. Um, where do you think AI will have the most profound impact on business in the next decade?
Gosh, I mean, it's a powerful question. What you're going to see is a lot of time-consuming tasks that were around content generation that is going to be shrunk quite a bit by AI. That can be a lot of different things: PowerPoint creations, email creations, Excel and Word document creations, memos, contracts, like all of that type of thing. You're going to see that time on that just shrunk considerably. Any people that have, concerns around that that's not the case or whatever, they are going to get better and better to the point where they are going to be able to produce that type of content very, very quickly. Where I think you'll see some of the transformation in business is that, people's jobs will change a little bit in that regard, where you're going to be a little bit more empowered than to be making some decisions that previously, a lot of your time was going to be spent in doing. I'm not going to say mundane tasks. I mean, generating contracts and things like that may be mundane to some. It may be somebody there may be other people that really enjoy doing that type of thing. But for both those personas, they will be empowered to, like, okay, the contract is going to be generated for you in 20 minutes. That's not going to be an issue.
Hmm.
Now it's, how are you going to present this? How are you, does this require a conversation with the customer? Does it require, extra because there's so many things from a contextual standpoint when you're continuing to do business that is still going to be extremely human focused. And so because of that, I think what you're going to see is people are going to be a little bit more empowered to, like, okay, now I've got the thing. What do I do with said thing? Because AI is going to be able to create that thing for you. It's not going to then go have a conversation with somebody on the other side of the table.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that opinion on AI. It's really, really been enjoyable. Brendan, I just want to thank you so much again for talking with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
That was Brendan Collins, Senior Director of Solutions Engineering at Rohirrim.